So, Manoj, thank you for agreeing to join this conversation. As you know, we are working on building sales leaders, and I could not think of a better person to talk about what goes into making a good salesperson than you. I've learned everything that I've learned. I've learned at your feet, so to say. So, Manoj, I think to open this conversation, a little bit about what you're doing right now would be useful, just to set the context, and then we will go to the beginnings.
Well, Deepak, first of all, it is my great honor, it's my great pleasure to be with you on this show today. I can only tell you that I have learned a lot from you. And I remember the early days when we were trying to set up the telecom business for one of the firms that we worked together. What a wonderful journey we had, sitting in a classroom, getting a professor, teaching us basics, and then kind of deciding, how our business and what trajectory that would take. I'll never be able to forget those days. So I'm truly honored with your very kind words, but I must reciprocate and say, I think I learned a lot from you. Well, what am I doing today? I work for the Mahindra Group, and essentially what I'm doing is I help different businesses within the Mahindra Group to engage more proactively with policymakers. Over the years, I realized that while we have spent most of our time in terms of trying to maximize returns in terms of our investments or on equity, or trying to grow the business, grow revenue, improve operating margins, but we work within an overall ambit of a certain policy framework. And therefore, the ability to understand the policy framework in a very constructive fashion, engage with policymakers so that we can make sure that there is a good, positive, enabling environment which will help businesses in India succeed. So that's what I'm doing today, trying to help perhaps, I know it's an audacious task to take our businesses to the next level through proactive, effective engagement with policymakers.
Wonderful. Manoj, it's a very challenging role. And in a sense, would you say that this is like a natural extension of the work that you've done all these years working with customers? And
Deepak, I think that a lot of people don't look at it as a natural extension, I can tell you very frankly. But I looked at it exactly the way that you described. Working with customers all my life, understanding, why some things happen and why some don't. And therefore, naturally going and seeing how we can overall create and influence a better business environment would be a good starting point. So it's like going to the root, and maybe I should have done it earlier in my career, but as they say, better late than never.
Right. So, Manoj, when did you first realize that you wanted to be in a customer-facing, kind of a role as against, probably being a technical? I believe you did your engineering, right? From IIT Kharagpur, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, Deepak, your memory is perfect. And it's very interesting. I think when I was in college, I did chemical engineering. Not that I chose chemical engineering, but as you know, in those days, you did the engineering that you got. And so, those were the cards dealt to me. And I have no regrets, by the way. But as I was studying engineering, I realized that I didn't see myself, and I think that we all have this very innately, right? Something in us tells us what we are made for, what we are built for, what we have come to this planet for. And one thing that I realized very early in the days was that I didn't see myself as somebody who would climb up a distillation column or sit and design heat exchangers. I never saw myself as that. And I always was very enamored with what I heard from some of my seniors around business roles, sales roles, customer-facing roles, and that really excited me. So I think right from my college days, that was something that always struck out. I can't pinpoint it to a specific reason except turning around and saying that when I looked at an external business customer-facing role versus doing a hardcore engineering, role, I think the business customer-facing role aligned more to my own thinking.
And I think that is probably something which is hard to find for a youngster starting out in life, to look for the right kind of inspiration, something that resonates with a person and which helps him in making a decision in terms of which way one want to go. I mean, typically, people stumble a little bit before finding something.
Well, Deepak, I would say that you have to truly, go deep within yourself and ask yourself those fundamental questions. And I've always seen that when you ask yourself those questions, you will always get the answers. I think because of so much noise around us, we somehow find it very difficult to have a conversation with ourselves. But I think if one tries hard enough, one will get the answer. One doesn't need to look for answers outside.
But still, something like a sales role, and typically engineering college education would not normally prepare one for a career like that, isn't it? Even today.
Well, Deepak, you're absolutely right. And in fact, I remember distinctly when I was interviewing for jobs in my final year, like all of us do, I tried to interview with firms which I knew also hired people on business sales roles. And when I turned up for the interview, I would tell the guys, look, I know that you've advertised for this graduate engineering trainee or some technical job, but I'm really interested in sales. So could you interview me for sales or a business role? And they would just smile at me and say, Manoj, for that you need to go to a business school. So we are here, we are in an engineering school. So we are here only to interview for those technical jobs. So believe me, I tried very hard. But, there was at that point in time, and I'm going back almost 40 years, there was this kind of thinking at that time that if you went to an engineering school, then it was technical jobs, it was sales or business, you went to different kinds of schools. So there were the stereotyped ways of thinking, except for one industry which came to me, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But really, you're absolutely right. At that time, it was even harder. I think it's much simpler now.
Right. So how did you then break through the ceiling, so to say, or break through the barrier, the glass wall?
Well, I think, destiny comes calling. So as I was interviewing for roles, I also found that a lot of computer companies at that time, as they were called, or IT companies, as we call them now, were coming into campus to hire for a lot of software related jobs. And at that point in time, this whole IT industry was at a very early cusp in terms of growth. And I'm talking of the early 80s. And when they came in, they started saying that, look, we don't mind what engineering you have done as long as you can go and clear our aptitude test. So a lot of at that time, there's no computer science when I was there. It kind of came in, just around that time. And so a lot of people from other engineerings, mechanical, chemical, civil, aeronautics, et cetera, they were all delighted because all of a sudden there was another avenue which was opening up. And one would go and take those written tests. And if your aptitude scores were good enough, you would go through an interview and you would get the job. And all of these firms said, you don't worry, we're going to put you through a very extensive training program. So we'll teach you whatever needs to be taught from an IT programming or other skills that they were teaching at that time. What I also found, and of course, I was not interested in those kind of roles because I never looked at myself as a coder, and I don't think I had the skill then. I don't think I have the skill now. So I said, it's great that you got the IT industry coming, but their focus is different. There were a few firms, very young firms, at that point in time, who were almost literally startups of those years, who came in and started looking at us, engineering students, from a business role perspective. And the reason is because many of the founders were our seniors. So they recognized that the innate talent existed with the students, who come in from an engineering background. And therefore, if we can bring them in, do a little bit of training, the guys are fundamentally great survivors, they're going to make it, and we're going to have hopefully tremendous success over the years. And so that's what happened. So there's a firm called HCL, and the founders, one of the founders of HCL was also from my college. Many of the people who worked at that point in time, in fact, the person who came to campus to interview us was also one of our seniors, significantly senior to me, of course. And so I think, there was no glass barrier there. This was a known campus. The guys themselves had grown up in this campus. They knew what it stood for. And so I applied for the job and I got it. I got a couple of more IT jobs and I got some technical jobs as well, because you always want to hedge your bets. So I got a job from two very young IT companies and I got a job from two very well-established engineering giants. I don't want to take their names now because I obviously didn't go and join that industry. So that's really, I think, the path, the door just opened up. I was blessed. I was fortunate.
And it is the IT industry's gain that you made the choice that you did, Manoj.
Well, Deepak, I think that I gained a lot by joining the right industry. And I must tell you this true story, and I'm sure it's going to enthuse many people listening in, that when I was about to, basically take the interview for the IT industry jobs, one of my colleagues from electronics and electrical communication came to me and said, Manoj, what if they ask you a question, a very simple question saying, what is a computer? How would you define a computer? What would your answer be? And I thought for a quick minute and I said, I would say it's a big calculator with big memory. And everyone just burst out laughing. And they said, with this answer, we don't know how the hell you're going to get a job in the IT industry. But life is always interesting. So I knew very little about the industry. Something in me told me that this is the path I should follow. And I was blessed and fortunate that my interview went well. And I can only tell you that over the years, I just polished, myself up to learn better definitions than what, I had thought a computer was back 40 years ago.
Right. A lot of young people that I have met in the course of my own career spend a lot of time trying to understand the definitions or trying to memorize the definitions, trying to get up to speed in terms of being able to talk technology. And I have somehow always felt that that is not the right way for a salesperson to be. Is that something that you would agree with?
Yes, absolutely, Deepak. And I think that some of the tenets when you look at in terms of driving success in sales begin with understanding the product, understanding the technology behind the product, and really assimilating the essence. Unless one does this, one will not get conviction about what one is trying to propose to a customer as a solution. And if one does not have conviction, you do not have the confidence of being able to have that conversation and convince the customer to close the deal. So I think all these C's are very, very important, starting with conviction, going on to confidence, having the right conversations, and then going on to closing the deal. And I can share many, many experiences, and I know that we may not have the time today, where my customers have really taught me that that is truly the essence of why they chose a specific product or technology over another. And therefore, it is not important to memorize, definitions or memorize terms, because when you memorize, it is very evident to the person sitting across that you're not speaking from your heart. You're not speaking out of conviction. You're speaking out of rote. And unless the customer sees genuineness, you're never going to close the deal.
I think that is probably the best lesson that I've learned working with you, Manoj, is to understand the customer's business and customer's need a little bit, to respect the customer and respect the fact that they've called you for a discussion, and not merely just go and memorize or speak out whatever we have learned, whatever we have memorized in our offices. So Manoj, but how did it work out in your first couple of years? I mean, straight out of college, did you just straight away get into sales situations, customer situations? Were you expected to handle difficult customer situations?
Well, Deepak, I can tell you it's only baptism by fire. So when I joined in, and I think that I must share this this truth about sales with everyone, because many of your listeners and many friends are going to be taking sales as a career, is that when you join in as a salesperson, you never get the best territory or the best accounts when you join in, because those have already been taken by the seniors. And you almost have to kind of go through, I would say, very significant challenge before you get into the bigger territories and the meaty accounts and so on. So like any young Turk, when I got in, I was posted to Eastern India. The firm that I worked for was very clear that they would not post you in the hometown, which I think is very, very good, because it gives you an opportunity of going and learning a lot more about new markets and new places. You find your space and you contribute based on your cultural background in a very wholesome fashion. And you bring about what you could say diversity in terms of views and thinking. So I belonged to Delhi and I was posted into Calcutta at that time, Kolkata now, which was the head of the Eastern region, which was fine. I studied in Kharagpur, so that was pretty much close to home for me. When I joined in, I was immediately told that my territory was, at that point in time, it was called North Bihar, now it is Bihar. Bihar, north of the river Ganges. And I was told that there was a senior colleague who was posted in Patna, and I would work with him. And my goal would be to make sure that we take care of our existing customers, make sure that they are happy, and then from there on, we'll take the next steps. I was also given a few customers to look after in the city of Calcutta, again, where senior sales teams had already sold to the customers. But my goal was really to make sure that we are meeting customer satisfaction goals and so on. So I think it was an easier step into sales for the first few months. At least that's what I thought. However, the reality hit me really hard, because what I realized when I started meeting these customers is that what was promised to them at the time of sales is not what they felt they were given or what was being delivered to them. So there was a big gap between expectation and reality. And I think in sales, all of us learn that when we are selling, many times we don't realize when we have crossed the Lakshman Rekha. And the kind of a dream that we are painting in front of the customer, is that a dream that we will be able to fulfill? Is that a dream that we will be able to deliver on? Many times salespeople forget that. So it was a lot of rude and shock learning for me that every customer that I met had a long list of things that had not been done or had been promised and not delivered. So when I came back and I would ask the sales guys, hey, did you go and really deliver or speak about all this? Did you know that, this was not costed? Or did you know that the product actually can't do all this? The sales guys would tell me, nahi, yaar, bechne ke liye bahut kuch bolna padta hai. And yeah, I remember I gave that commitment, but I think somewhere I forgot to write it in the order sheet. Because what was written in the order sheet was a replica of the purchase order, and all the silent verbal commitments were never captured. So I said, don't worry, that's between you and me. I will go make sure I try and deliver some of the stuff which I can. So all of a sudden I became a trainer, because a lot of free training was committed by the sales guys, which was never delivered. And this was training by hundreds and thousands of man hours. So I said, don't worry, I will go do that. And believe me, Deepak, I would sit up all night. I would read the manuals, which I would borrow from the customer, because next day morning I had to go and run the tutorial and run the training program, because we had to achieve the milestones before we actually got our payments, as a firm. So I think this really forced me in a way to learn in an accelerated fashion around technology, around products, around what it can do, around software, around functionality, around driving value, and helping customers achieve the fundamental goals for which they had actually gone and purchased very expensive IT products at that time. And mind you, that time it was really tough to go sell a computing device. Nobody quite understood what computers did. Please remember, I'm going back 4 decades. So I think that was the interesting part of the journey, that I looked at every opportunity and rather than complaining, took the challenge up and looked at it as a great opportunity to improve myself, to learn, so that it would stand me in good stead going forward in the future. I never went and squealed to my bosses saying, all these sales guys have taken the company for a ride X, Y, or Z. I just decided I've got an opportunity. Let me take a constructive approach. Let me demonstrate teamwork. and let me make sure that all the guys around me think that, yes, I'm a problem solver. So that's really the start of my journey. And then, of course, I moved into a more active front-facing sales role over time.
That's a very valuable insight, Manoj, because I was about to say that a lot of people may have considered that to be an adversity, to be something, a difficult situation which they have been thrown into, and may not have wanted to actually go ahead and do what you did. So that's great learning, really. I think a lot of young people get into that, come to that point where they feel that they are being victimized because they are young people, because they are newbies, and so they are being taken advantage of, and so many opportunities go up begging for that reason.
And I think, Deepak, that's a very important lesson, that when certain cards are dealt to you, learn to play with those cards. Don't complain. Don't take a negative approach to life. Don't stand in front of the mirror and start crying, looking at yourself. These moments come for everyone. There were many times in my early years when I would truly ask myself a question, that have I made the right choice? Is this what I was supposed to do? Because one of the important lessons to learn in sales is how to handle rejection. You never win every deal that you're going after. In fact, when you look back at your career years later, you'll find you have lost more deals than you have won. But every time you lose a deal, how do you make sure you continue to remain motivated so that next day in the morning, when you're out pounding in the streets, you again go back with the same conviction, with the same confidence that, look, I know how to win and I'm not a loser. And believe me, Deepak, there have been deals which I have lost one after the other, streams of deals that I have lost. But I always kind of motivated myself. And you don't have to look for external motivations, because when you're losing a lot of deals, many times your boss also thinks that this guy has lost the magic. And I don't think that this guy can continue in sales for too much longer, because sales is a game about winning. Sales is a game about numbers. Sales is a game about achievement. And that can only happen if you are self-motivated, you have the confidence, and after no matter how many losses, you kind of wake up and go right out there next day, ready to fight.
But easier said than done, though, isn't it? I mean, when you're young, fresh out of a premier college, and facing these difficult situations, what kind of support systems does one have to turn back to? What kind of support systems did you have to navigate through?
Yeah, Deepak, I would say I was very blessed and fortunate to have fantastic set of colleagues. They were the ones that I really turned back to. They were the ones who used to teach me. If I lost a deal, I would sit and I would brainstorm with them in terms of, what really could have happened. And they were the ones who would give me an outside-in view. I think I was also blessed and fortunate to have some fantastic bosses with whom I had the opportunity to learn. And I would say that I learned lots of my sales lessons from them. When I would go on sales calls with them, or, when I would kind of recount a sales situation and the different angles that they would kind of throw at me and challenge me with, or the kind of hints, if I were to use the term, they would give me in terms of taking different approaches, I think was phenomenal. So my colleagues, as well as my seniors and my bosses, I think all of them were my gurus. And I just made sure that I kept an open mind. And I know that when they were giving feedback, it was not personal about me. The feedback was about how I was handling, or how I had handled the situation. And many times, Deepak, I had made fundamental mistakes, like not qualifying the deal well enough, being so desperate because I didn't have a sales pipeline that just go after any and every deal that came my way. So it was not surprising that I used to lose many of them till I learned how to do the fundamentals right.
That's a very, 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 very valuable insight, Manoj. Something I think a lot of people could really make use of, because that's a normal human tendency is to go and pump up the funnel as when you face difficult situations, but that may lead to bigger problems down the line. Like you said, you talked about this learning from your bosses, etc. What is the attitude of the learner? What is the attitude that a learner can bring to table which enables this kind of a learning? Just like you were able to learn in a difficult situation, how does somebody else also do the same?
I think it's, Deepak, it's a lot about open communication. and the fact that you have nothing to hide. Particularly when you lose a sales deal, I found many sales guys try and hide it and not let the world know until you open the newspaper one day if the deal is significant enough to get to know it's been lost. So many salespeople just think that the world will forget about it and they kind of move on as if nothing had happened. Whereas there is tremendous learning in every deal that you lose, just as there is tremendous learning in every deal that you win. So I think what the approach I took was that I would go to my boss and in my regular reviews, I would talk about all the deals I lost, the deals I won in a very open and transparent fashion. I think that also provided me the opportunity to get feedback. Likewise, I would do with my colleagues. The moment I would lose a deal, obviously one is quite depressed when one loses a deal. We are human beings, we have emotion. I would come back to the office and I would, kind of share it with my colleagues, my friends, and I would say, bad news, I really worked hard. I worked 2 years on this deal or 12 months or, many of the deals are long sales cycles, Deepak. And it breaks your heart when after putting in efforts for months, weeks and years, you lose a deal. And then I would say, look, this is how I lost the deal. And my colleagues, obviously, they were all sales guys and some of them were very good solutions, pre-sales guys. They knew this is life and, these things happen. But then, we would kind of spend several hours going late into the evening, talking about the deal, looking at different angles, and then trying to understand as to what was the learning. If the deal was significant enough, our boss would also discuss it in our regular, weekly meetings and so on. So I think open communication is critical. Trusting your boss, trusting your colleagues that, they mean well for you, that they are not going to go after you is, again, a very, very big enabler of this learning process. And I know that in today's day and age, there are people who will throw a guy who's lost a deal under the bus. But the world is also full of very, very good people, very, very good bosses who will be only delighted to help you improve, help you become better. Because guess what? If I become a better sales guy, not only am I achieving my target, my boss is also achieving his target. So I think our destinies are all linked. And as long as we understand that, having an open communication is helpful.
I think that's a really valuable lesson for people who may be listening in, because it may be difficult sometimes to trust people around you to do the right thing, and yet there is no way forward until one learns to trust, especially seniors who can give the guidance. Manoj, what about non-sales? A lot of people are very fond of saying sales is not for me. But something that I felt that, having a customer exposure to be able to understand a business problem from a customer's perspective is something that may be useful for a non-sales, so-called non-sales person as well. What would be your advice to people who want to come into IT but who may not want to be, or who are not comfortable with the customer-facing role?
Well, Deepak, the reality is whether we like it or not, whether we want to face up to it or not, every role in business is a customer-facing role. It could be internal customers. So just because I'm sitting in the finance function in the organization, it doesn't mean that it's not a customer-facing role. Your other colleagues, the other departments, the other functions are all your customers. Likewise, if you're in supply chain in the organization, you're dealing with not just internal functions, internal colleagues, you're also dealing with the external world, with potential suppliers and so on and so forth. So they all, fall into this broader definition of the word called customer. So I think every role in business is a customer-facing role. Yes, there are some customer-facing roles which are more direct revenue generating. There are other customer-facing roles which could be compliance related, yet there could be others which are support related. But in any case and every case, you are dealing with a set of customers. They only tag differently. Could be an internal customer or an external customer. So the art of working with teams, the art of working with people is fundamental. Now, whether you have the business card saying you're a salesperson or not, but the traits and the skills that you need are similar.
Fantastic. I think That's a wonderful thing that you said, Manoj. To be able to do this, to be able to work with people, to be able to, like you said, everybody is a customer, whosoever that we're working with. What are the kind of skills that you would recommend that young people should look to build, should explicitly look to build out?
I think several, they seem very simple but important skills. The first is the art of listening. Because and there's a difference between hearing and listening. When you're listening, listen with the serious intent of truly putting yourself in the shoes of the other person. Understand their point of view, why they are saying what they are saying. So listening doesn't mean that when the other person is talking, I just keep my mouth shut. The moment that person stops, I start. I know what I want to say, and I am not really trying to deeply, deeply understand the other person's point of view. So the art of listening is a skill, and it is not easy. It comes over time, because many times we may decide not to interrupt. So many times people say, of course I listened, I never interrupted. Well, not interrupting is not listening. So I think that's an important skill. The second skill is that when you're making a decision, take into account diverse views. Just because somebody's view is different from yours doesn't mean you discard it, doesn't mean you trash it, doesn't mean you start getting into the kind of crazy debates that you see on TV. That is not having a conversation. So I think it's very, very important to have a constructive conversation. Once you have listened actively and once you have put yourself in the shoes of the other person. So I think the art of conversing is incredibly important, because when you converse, you are able to uncover what are the hidden maybe challenges that the other person is facing, what are the fears that the other person has, and therefore if you are proposing a solution, how should it address up to those needs, how should it address those fears, those expectations. That becomes much clearer. I've also spoken about the fact that you must learn your products, technologies, and solutions well. Many times I have heard people turn around and say, oh, how would I know the details of the product? I am only a poor sales guy. A sales guy must know enough about the product as a technical person. Because if you do not know the product, there is no way you will be able to translate that in terms of, as I said, addressing the customer's needs. So understanding product, technology, solution is very, very important. Being empathetic. Many times we have deadlines. We need to close the deal within a certain period of time because our quarter is coming to an end and we hustle, hustle, hustle. You have to be empathetic. You have to understand that the customer also has a process. And unless you understand the customer's process, you might many times lose the deal, because the definition of the customer itself is a broad customer. While I'm saying the word customer, it cannot be one individual. There'll be many individuals who have different roles to play in the decision-making cycle. All of them together as a group, I am calling as a customer. So understanding the customer's organization, understanding the roles of different individuals, taking the time to walk the hallways, building very strong informal relationships so that you can connect on a one-to-one, person-to-person basis. All of these skills are incredibly important, what somebody would call networking skills. So lots of different things that I've spoken about: active listening, learning to have a conversation, making sure that you understand products, technologies, solutions incredibly well, building the network within the customer's organization. Last but not least of all, being humble and being respectful. These two are incredibly important. Many times I find that sales guys, after winning 3, 4, 5 deals, think that they're unassailable, that they are now the Rambo. They are going to win every deal. And they walk into the next deal and their hubris just brings them down. So I think one thing that selling always teaches you is to be humble, because the reality, Deepak, is that this is not a perfect science. Why you win a deal, why you don't win a deal, the answers are different each time. The recipe cannot be repeated. There is a new recipe each time. When you lose, when you win, the circumstances, environment, ecosystem, people that you're working with, you're dealing with human beings, you're not dealing with robots, is very different. So being humble is incredibly important. And that's the lesson that I've learned through life.
Wonderful, wonderful. I don't think anybody could have summarized it better than you have done. These are wonderful lessons for people who are listening in, and extremely valuable tips for anybody looking to build a career in sales line, like you said, revenue generating sales line, or even otherwise in corporate life where everybody is a customer, more or less. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing your wisdom with us. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
The honor has been mine, Deepak, and I'd like to wish you all the very best. I'd like to wish everyone who's listening in tremendous success in sales. It's a wonderful career. I am truly honored that I chose this career and the career chose me. And I would never have opted to do anything else if I were given an opportunity to relive my life. So to all budding sales guys, wish you all the best.